possibility, I mean the kind of attending found in Dr. Tart's telepathic experiment. Subject A's primary process gave clear body signals of the moment when subject B was shocked. Out of the multitude of possibilities within the general field of awareness, the process chose according to the request made from the individual self system, even though that self system did not know how to open to the answer. Here again, we find the real thrust and meaning of individuation and its role in the hologram possibilities of life. The unique and separated self, with its volitional system and capacity to choose, selects some target from the primary process or plays with some possibility out of a continuum of possibilities. See chapter 15. The primary process responds to volition and furnishes the result. Dr. Tart requested certain information. The primary process responded with clear perceptions. Shortly after...
Have you all got that? This is important, right? So now in the experiment where the guy A was to determine when guy B was going to get shocked. So the instruction was given consciously to guy A, but what happened? Consciously, the guy A did not respond or did not get any awareness of when B was being shocked. But the primary process also got that instruction. So the primary process, which is the bodily sensations, the blood pressure, the skin galvanizing response, the heartbeat, the breathing, all that actually responded to when B was being shocked. So what he says in the last line, the primary process responded with clear perception. So again, the inner perception responded, but what we were consciously aware of, we were not consciously aware of what that inner perception was perceiving. So we've disconnected from the body system. We don't listen to our bodies enough.
Shortly after one of my sons turned 4, I noticed his interest in and aptitude for music, so I started him on piano studies. He sat in my lap at the keyboard. I placed his hands on mine and we did notes. I used little verbal instruction, but we sang our notes as we played them. With one hand, we pointed to the note on the page. With the other, we played the note. Switched hands as needed, up and down, rhythmically swinging through page after page, and then book after book of little fingers, music, one note at a time stuff, which was just my speed. Before long, I simply took my hands out from under his, and he was doing notes, singing descriptions, swinging along. It was fun. For the first year, we played together that way. Then autonomy took over and he sat alone. By then, he had left my one note stumbles behind, and I placed him with a Juilliard graduate who concertized in our area. By age 5.5, he could read almost anything his hands could encompass. He had perfect pitch and wrote tunes while sitting in his window seat. He would sing them to us, go back, harmonize them in neat classical triads, go to the piano, and play his finished piece. By age 6, he played Bach, Clementi, and Bartok with astonishing skill, ease, and sophistication. His hands coordinated perfectly, his sight reading was superb, and he memorized almost immediately. His teacher and I could never understand how he knew classical harmony intuitively, nor how any of his skill had unfolded so rapidly. By the time he was 7, however, he faltered. We had started him in private school at 5. He quickly became a fine reader and an all-round splendid student. And the more he became immersed in reading, to the great applause of parents and teachers, the more rapidly his music collapsed. By 8, his coordination was gone. His superb reading ability was gone. He no longer had perfect pitch and he no longer wrote pieces.
So what happened over here? in this age, that's the age of neural growth, right? Now, if I don't use a neural pathway, there is a slaughtering of the nerve of the neurons at that age of 7. When at the age of 5 he started shifting, the neural pathways are not being used. The neural connections got slaughtered. So by the age of 8, he was over. He could not do it anymore.
A number of factors had entered at age 4. The rudiments of individuation had given the possibility of creative relations between self and primary process. Our extremely close rapport had given a mutual exchange, our own form of psychological communication. In spite of my lack of keyboard skill, I had extensive musical study and experience. All this had acted as a strong stimulus to my son's similar leanings. The
Okay,
primary
I'd like to stop here. Now, this is extremely important. Whenever we want to learn something, if we sit in the field or the energy of a person who knows that subject, our learning will automatically start getting enhanced. Okay, so because the father, that means the author, had a lot of extensive music study and experience, it just transferred to the son.
The primary process shared between us had this immediate continuum of possibilities on which to draw. His learning was kept completely within the category of play, and because that play involved, for the first year, actually sitting in my lap, the entire venture took place in the safe confines of the bond.
Again,
Performance
this becomes very important. If we are stressed out, we cannot learn. So a safe environment was given to the child, which allowed the learning to take place within a known territory. So there's a link created between the unknown and the known. Okay.
Performance or learning was not the issue. Stress and anxiety were avoided, and so he learned at a remarkable rate. He played, and the absorbent mind characteristic of that period worked beneath the surface, exactly as the two systems, play and work, are designed to do. In chapter 18, I will explore how this synchrony is split by schooling, in which the self is not allowed to play but must try to do the work, wrecking the marvelous balance of forces involved in learning. Primitive peoples often exhibit a fine sense of balance between volitional choice and primary process in their learning. Farley Mova, a Canadian biologist, relates the story of how an Eskimo friend of his, the minor shaman, Utek, gained an uncanny knowledge of and rapport with wolves. Utek's father had been a full shaman, a kind of spiritual leader, medicine man, and mediator for his people, who communed with the spirits and rulers of nature.
So what is a shaman? A shaman is the person who, the definition of the shaman is the person who goes into altered states of consciousness and downloads information which is beneficial for the tribe. So he intuitively finds where do they hunt, where do they go and set up the tents, where will they find water, where is it safe, where is it not safe. And the second one is that he performs miracles. Performs miracles relates to healing. So he is the healer of the tribe. And the shaman, it the proof of a shaman was in eating the pudding. So if the guy did not heal people, he used to get kicked out as a shaman. So he had to heal people and get proper information for the tribe.
When Utek was 5 years of age, his father left him with a wolf pack for 24 hours. After an initial thorough sniffing, the adults ignored the child, but the cubs played with him roly poly the entire time. Then the father returned, walked into the pack, and retrieved his son. As a result of this experience and the general tutelage of his father, Utek could interpret all wolf calls for the tribe. For instance, at one point he heard quite distant wolves howling, then a nearby pack answering the distant signals. Utek announced, that a caribou herd was so many hours north, heading west. The hunter of the group immediately left, returning the next day with ample meat, having intercepted the caribou just where Utek had indicated.
So
On another,
this is a little like Mowgli, na? When Mowgli was in the forest, he could interpret all the signals, all the signs. Why? Because as a child, he grew up in the forest, in the company of all the animals.
on another occasion, Utek heard distant wolves delightedly leaped up and excused himself to prepare for a short trip. The wolves had informed him, or rather, he had eavesdropped on their signals, that people were some certain hours away, heading towards Utek's camp. Utek knew somehow that these were his cousins and, according to protocol, hastened to meet them. The next day, he returned, happily introducing his cousins to Moa. We have no way of telling when primary perceptions begin to function, and we have a tendency to lump all sorts of non ordinary phenomena under a handy heading such as ESP. Actually, a wide range of intellectual capacities are involved. The selective capacity of the absorbent 4-year-old mind to draw on a continuum of knowing, as I am sure happened in Mozart's case. He never attended a day of school, or my son's case is one of the myriad possible uses of this synergy, and only by degree different from Mother Fox knowing a flood was imminent. Telepathy is just such a communication between individuals through the primary process, and it begins to be noticed around age 4. On the other hand, imaginary play projections begin very early in the child, as do visual phenomena later lost to us. Around 15 months of age, most children begin to point. In the home, pointing may be a request for a name. In most cases, the child points and then watches the parent to read the parent's body and facial reactions. Outside the home, in a park, for example, the child uses pointing in a highly stylized manner. In his or her explorations, she or he moves away from the mother, but nearly always remains within sight of her. When she or he encounters an unknown or unpredictable event, she or he stops, turns partly towards the mother, points to the unidentified phenomenon or event, and looks intently at the mother's face. She or he does not speak or make any sound. If the mother smiles, she or he moves to interact with the event. If she frowns, the child immediately returns to her. If she pays no attention or makes no response, the toddler will go on to her, tug, point, and watch her face.
So this becomes important. So important how the mother is responding to the child. And the child is always watching the mother. So when children are growing up, the parents have to be very careful as to what they are saying, what they are doing, how are they behaving, because a child watches everything.
Anderson, who spent a great deal of time researching this pointing syndrome, says that many times the child, on receiving no response from the mother, goes to her, tugs, points, and when she or he still does not get a response, finally verbalizes man coming or dog coming, or perhaps using some general animal name. The frequency of this phenomenon intrigued Anderson because neither he nor the mother ever saw the various people, animals, or things towards which the child pointed in these cases. Anderson referred to these as the child's imaginary novelties. To the very early child, primary perceptions would be indistinguishable from any other experience. The child is biologically geared to take his or her cues from his or her parents. Only as the child begins to sense that the parents do not take part in, share, or approve certain experiences can she or he possibly begin to differentiate among his or her own perceptions. In this, we have one key to the all too frequent failure to develop primary perceptions. Part of the 2-year-old's passionate WhatsApp mama is the desire to have his or her experience verified. This reality check with parents occurs throughout childhood. Pointing serves the same purpose, and in the open, it serves or must once have served specific survival purposes. Infant animals newly taken into the field by their mothers follow much the same procedure as the pointing 2-year-old.
So over here again, it becomes very important that if the child is asking you a question, you pay attention and answer the child. Okay. Many times you ignore the child and then the child gets jiddi कि मेरा बात सुनो, मेरा बात सुनो, मेरा बात सुनो. Okay.
Can't hear.
Who can't hear? You have to log out and log in again. Everyone else can hear, right?
We can hear.
Yes, we can hear.
All of us can hear.
Yep, absolutely.
That's someone's phone.
Nikhil,
Ah,
the voice for me also was coming low, so I put my earphones, so it's better.
Yeah.
So the voice is a little softer today.
yeah, so Shivanga, you have to move closer to your computer.
It's page 135. Someone's asked where we are. The third paragraph. When a child gets his name label for an experience, the name enters into the concept concerning that experience and becomes an integral part of the thing's event structure. In addition to being a mind-brain-body coordinate, the name gives the child a common ground with his or her parents concerning that experience. They have granted sanction to that experience. The child will then selectively attend this kind of experience in the future and be much more likely to repeat it, filling out and practicing that particular concept. Furthermore, his or her shared experiences reinforce the bond with the parents and continually verify his or her increasingly selective experience and worldview. If the child asks,
Have you all got this now? So the more experiences that the child shares with the parent, the more strong the bond becomes with the parent. And it is extremely important at this stage for that bond to develop, for the next matrix to develop. Because if the mother-father bond is not properly cultivated, the next matrix starts to have a problem.
if the child asks for a name and for whatever reason does not get it, the child senses that the parent does not share that experience or give it sanction. The concept of that event will not be filled in. It will remain shallow and eventually disappear. Selective inattention results. When a child reports some phenomenon that the parent has no grasp of, as many of Jampolsky's and Peterson's children did, the parent is usually disturbed. This negativity is immediately apparent to the child and weighs against his or her repeating the experience. Sooner or later, the child's concern for bonding and later his concern for social consensus will lead to selective inattention screening out that kind of experience. Peterson showed some older students' pictures drawn by his 7-year-olds showing various odd colors around things and asked them if they had ever seen such things. Yes, they replied, but not anymore. Caused too much trouble.
Are you all
And-
getting this? That means the children were seeing auras and they were drawing the auras, but because the parents did not have any conception of auras, they were debunking that experience. So the children stopped drawing the auras.
And it had taken Peterson some time to win the confidence of the 7-year-old so that they would confide in him all about the colors and things. They all had said that when they told their parents about it, their parents' colors changed to red.
Are you all getting this? So the parent aura, they were seeing the auras of the parent, and whenever something confusing was put in front of the parents, they got a little disturbed and got a little agitated. So their frequency immediately turned to red.
The problem of imaginary perceptions in children has long been a subject of discussion and debate, just as their general magical thinking has been. The psychologist Smithies once spoke of the quasi-hallucinatory character of childhood. Hallucination is an interesting term. a pathological manifestation, a pictorial and symbolic expression of neurotic mental structures. Because childhood in all the cultures is filled with such activity, we must then assume children are born with quasi or partially pathological or neurotic mental structures. Of course, we straighten them out.
So this is a very, very unfortunate thing. You're restricting a natural ability of the child and then shutting it off.
Hallucination is any perceptual phenomenon that not shared by whoever is setting the criteria or making up the terms. That is, agree with me or you are, by definition, crazy. Virtually all children in all cultures share this failure to distinguish between the real and the non-real, which would indicate, according to our terms, that nature has somehow programmed error into the plan. Some people might feel that my examples of non-ordinary phenomena and exceptional children do not represent the norm, and so we are not valid. Had White simply observed that 1 out of every 30 children was exceptionally bright and made no further investigation because they certainly were outside the norm, we would have not had the fine insights he has given us. But he moved to find out why, and he clearly shows that the exceptionally intelligent child receives a very specific, obviously exceptional, kind of interaction with his or her parents.
So again, the interaction of the parent with the child is the base or the cornerstone of the development of the intelligence in the child.
In the same way, to consider ESP a rare gift is to miss the significance of our whole heritage and take the easy way out. There are no errors programmed into our biological plan. Primary perceptions are bondings to the earth and no more rare than the infant mother communions observed in Uganda. Such communions are not found in our country simply because we treat our infants differently and so we get a different product.
So epigenetics, there is genetics and epigenetics. Epigenetics deals with your environment. What is the environment that you have around you while you are growing up? So epigenetics really plays a huge part in our development.
Think of ESP as the primary perceptions becoming functional around age 4 when the biological division of labor has begun. Active associations and relationships of a perpetual nature can begin the exchange between primary process and child. The logic of differentiation is then beginning to distinguish between self and world. Only then would any particular otherness of a primary perception be noted. Examine the character of the perceptions these children report. They note that a person's color changes according to mood. Consider clairvoyance, precognition, telepathy. Do you not see how vital such capacities would be for the general bondings to the earth as the child prepares to move from mother towards the wide world? Primary perceptions are designed to establish links between self and world, and they utilize sound biological procedures in the brain. Primary perceptions furnish a way of drawing on nature's body of knowledge and of being informed by this general field of awareness as needed for well-being. Consider Utek and the wolves, the mother fox and the flood, animals before an earthquake. Do not be too ready to dismiss the implications here, for we are dealing with a 3 billion year genetic system that can code almost anything into a brain. Although we have alienated and estranged ourselves so thoroughly from our larger body of life, as Dr. Tart's experience show, that larger body and marvelous heritage have not abandoned us. Unless perfect pitch is explained and enough roughing in instruction is given for the child to be tested for it, the talent will never be perceived. Could this not be the case with many other talents vital to our well-being? Shields finds telepathy peaking at around age 4. Most children lose it somewhere after 7. Van T. Castle finds a decline of extrasensory perception in general by the 7th grade. Should telepathy peak and fade? Should my English friends' little girls have lost their capacities around age 7, or my son have lost his gift at that age? Should my musicologist friend find perfect pitch at 4, but not at 7 or 8? Should the infant's abilities to recognize the mother's face fade within a few hours after birth and not to be reclaimed for weeks? Should the infant's initial excitement so quickly turn to distress? Piaget finds a form of creative logic unfolding in late childhood that he calls the highest form of human intelligence, but he laments in noting that the ability is almost never found in adults. We observe all sorts of marvelous qualities unfolding that then disappear, and we assume that they were simply passing aberrations and so should disappear. Some people respond that my examples are not typical and so not valid. From where are they taking their models? From the lowest common denominator after the damage has been done, such as Spitz and the rest assume over and over for generations that the newborn should be a vegetable because Freud said so.
So because anyone in authority, when they say something, then it sticks. So changing the paradigm is a huge issue. It's not so easy to do.
Play in the service of survival. Play is the universal characteristic in the young of all higher species. Because the economy of nature rules out random or wasted action in the formative period, the child's driving intent to play all the time must logically be a major part of the biological plan. Piaget found that play was in the service of intelligence but not developmental. That is, play serves many vital needs and functions of the child's growth, but is not in itself a source of conceptual growth. Intelligence grows when the child encounters some new information or event, assimilates this into his conceptual system, just as we digest food, and makes an accommodation to that event, just as we grow new muscles. Accommodation means structuring new conceptual patterns in the brain to account for the dissimilarities in the new experience or problem. Previous patterns grow more flexible through accommodations, giving a greater ability to interact. Intellectual development always involves a balance between the ability to assimilate and the ability to accommodate play. Play, Piaget says, is not developmental because this balance does not take place. In play, it is as though the child can eat and eat without anything ever reaching his digestive tract. Two categories of play are observed in the child according to Piaget: fantasy play and imitative play. Both forms use imagination, which is defined as creating an image not present to the senses. Fantasy play is often called symbolic play because a form of symbolism seems involved. That is, an object becomes symbolic of larger, more realistic phenomena. In fantasy play, materials or objects from the world are assimilated by the child and interacted with, but the child's conceptual system makes no accommodation to the object. His or her fantasy interactions are that the object she or he interacts with do the changing. The child sees an empty matchbox. This matchbox offers a whole continuum of possibilities for that child's imagination. The matchbox, with its cover off, can immediately be seen as a bed, a boat, a car. With its top on, it becomes a chest for treasure, a cash register. An inner image or idea of the possibilities inherent with that shape is projected onto the box. The box then becomes, for example, a boat. The box does not stand for a boat in that child's play reality. The child's actual concept of boat and his or her concept of box make no adaptation to their marked differences. The child's brain dismisses all dissimilarities the box actually has to the pattern of boat. No rerouting or relaying of the points of dissimilarity take place in his or her brain. The child's image of play overrides the differences. The inner image fills the gaps between the established concept of boat and the information coming in from the box. The brain assimilates the sensory stimuli of the box, but only those points of similarity held in common with the inner concept of boat are used in the fantasy perception of the child's play reality. The mind brain clearly distinguishes the play reality from the world as it is. When the play is over, all concepts remain as they were because only imagination was used to fill the gaps in the rather astonishing dissimilarities. Thus, there is no development in the ordinary developmental sense. In fantasy play, the child registers stimuli from part of his or her world. She or he takes in an object, but she or he makes that object accommodate to him or her. She or he makes the object serve his or her fantasy image by transforming it to match that fantasy image, and his or her play is with that transformed object. The child has at this point bent the world to the service of desire, as Piaget expresses it. In imitative play, there is no assimilation, only accommodation. The structural change that takes place only in the child's bodily movement, used in the imitation, not in the conceptual structures of knowledge about the figure imitated. The child observes some particular physical activity in a parent, for instance, and mimics those actions with his or her own. For instance, watch a child observing the father shaving. The child will move his or her face in the particular grimacing motions the father makes. The child watching the mother mix a cake will go through the same motions as she or he watches and will repeat these motions when given pots and pans to play with. This imitative play is obviously useful for learning immediate social rules and practical actions. It will take on greater significance after age 7. In imitative play, the child acts as though she or he is the adult model she or he is imitating, and the purpose of this imitation is to assume the powers of the adult imitated. The game is to accommodate to the model by adapting one's own body to the actions of the model. The more perfect and accurate the resemblance of body movements, the better the play. For instance, when I was 9 or 10, we would come home on a Saturday from the Tarzan movie and feel impelled to strip down, no matter how cold and wet the weather was, and go leaping from branch to branch of the little apple tree, making appropriate ape calls, beating our chests as our hero model had done. By our physical accommodations to his image, we were ourselves then transformed into that image. And in that transformation, we assumed our model's powers over the world. In fantasy play, the box became the boat. In our imitative play, our spindly shanks and chests were transformed into the glorious power of the ape man himself. The image out there had transformed the image in here. Thus, imitation serves the same function as fantasy play. The child plays that she or he can exercise a control over the world, bend that world to some desire within, or that she or he can become the desired model with all that model's power by imitating the model's actions. The central act of mind in both cases is imagination. Imagination is possible only to the extent that the conceptual patterns from which points of similarity can be drawn are there in the mind-brain system. The object must offer a continuum of possibility, and so must the brain's knowledge. A child can only imagine him or herself to be someone else, or one object to be another, when both subject and target exist in his or her structure of knowledge. The boat is not present to the senses, only a little matchbox. Tarzan's muscular prowess is not present, only skinny limbs. But a sufficient number of points of similarity between the actual object, our skinny limbs, and the internal image, our knowledge of the model, are present. The points of similarity are sufficient for the conceptual image held within to fill in the gaps created by the dissimilarities and so create the necessary reality perceptions that make up play. Filling in the conceptual gap with imaginary material, ignoring all dissimilarities, is the essence of child play. The regulatory feedback mechanism apparently makes a clean distinction between the imaginary filling in of the gaps of dissimilarity and the actual reroutings necessary by an actual concrete interaction. The concrete concepts of the world are kept separate and so not changed by these incomplete acts of play. The great rule is play on the surface and the work takes place beneath. The child's mind plays on the basic conceptual brain set without altering it, rather as a musician plays on an instrument without his playing altering the character or nature of that instrument. As I have noted, growth of intelligence is never a conscious process. Conceptual changes always take place below awareness. Of what is the child aware in a fantasy play? She or he is aware of the reality of his or her own play creation, a reality that exists neither in world out there nor in the concrete concepts of the child's brain. Play reality, like adult reality, is neither world nor mind brain. It is world plus mind brain. How many times have we heard parents and teachers complain? All they want to do is play. A child's relentless absorption in play seems to be a problem for adults. Nearly everything we want to do with and even for the child seems to run against this formidable competitor. Play and reality adjustment are counterclaims on the child. His or her intent is to play with the world, whereas our intentions are to make him or her attend ideas of ours and work. Psychologists have found a relationship between animal play, particularly among higher primates, and human play. In both, play offers a way by which the young can learn the social rules and adapt to them with minimum risks. In both, play offers a chance for the child to learn to use tools without economic pressures. Vygotsky gets close to the matter in his observation of play as a pivot between the real and the imaginary. But he misses the point by not understanding the difference between world and reality. Almost unanimously, psychologists fall into the error of considering the child's play to be wish fulfillment at a fantasy level. Because play absorbs the majority of a young child's life and on into adulthood and is an incredibly varied and rich activity, almost any comments about it are in some way probably applicable. Beneath all the studies and comments about animal and child play runs a central, if unrecognized, thread. Play serves survival, but our notions for survival are so grim, so opposite to play. The very word conjures up pictures of a grey marginal existence hanging to life by a thread, down to the last tissue or tank of gas. Instead, consider survival to be the victory of life over death, a cause for celebration. This victory is what constitutes most animal play, even such a purely economic function as the chimpanzee playing at termiting, extracting termites from an anthill by inserting a piece of straw into the entrance hole. Consider the passionate intensity with which young animals play, the abandoned joy and even frenzy with which a puppy leaps up at the slightest invitation, dashes madly about, ferociously close into snapping range, bounds away in great circles, works himself to fever pitch. He is practicing mock battle, perhaps closing in on the prey. In my play with him, I may be another dog with whom he is doing mock combat, or some fantasy rabbit projected for his pursuit. Animal play clearly serves several purposes: learning of social rules in a non-serious atmosphere where mistakes are tolerated, mock hunting if the animal is a predator, mock evasion if he is a prey animal, mock combat if the combat is part of his species species societal means for establishing hierarchies, mock mating or preliminary sexual play before full sexuality emerges. All these are necessary to the animal's survival learning. The young rabbits in my backyard, being prey animals, play the exciting game of evasion, freeze, listen, move fast, freeze, listen, move fast, dodge, twist, leap, double back in random, haphazard but purposeful enthusiasm. This is the practice of their survival, and such practice is always joyful for all species because one always wins in play, at least child play. Play is its own reality experience, a state in which survival is always successful, where life always wins out over death. The image within being projected without does not have to adapt to the actual concreteness out there. What is there adapts to what is within. The young animal glides smoothly into autonomy without ever making a distinction between the preliminary play and the later work. And what of the child? The underlying purpose of the child's play is the same as those other species. There is a qualitative difference, though, between the nature of the animal's play and that of the human child. The difference lies in the nature of the child's fantasy and the thrust behind his or her imitations and the tools and techniques of survival being unconsciously learned. I am sure no animal is aware that it is learning several survival techniques as it plays with its mother and siblings. Surely a human child has no possible notion of survival learning, so more than the 2-year-old is aware that his or her mind brain is structuring a knowledge of the world. Intent always precedes ability. The biological plan prepares for functions that will become fully operative much later. This brings us to an underlying hypothesis running throughout this book, the dual nature of the mind brain. I am not referring only to a division of labor involving separate hemispheres and so on. I am also referring to two levels of activities that are going on in the child almost from the beginning. I have said that the first 7 years are devoted exclusively to one thing, structuring a knowledge of the world, exactly as it is. And yet, in the economy of nature, many functions are accomplished at once, and again, intent is always running years ahead. We find that all they want to do is play, and the child spends virtually all his or her time, if allowed, at play. She or he is designed to play with the world, experiencing both the world and his or her ability play reality. The reality played with is the world filtered through the fantasy projections of play.
So this becomes important, okay? So if the child is not allowed to play, because that is his way of integrating what he is experiencing in the conceptual world into his own inner world. So that's why the child must be allowed to play.
In the conscious awareness of the child, there is play. Although play is not intellectual development, as Piaget makes clear, every nutrient needed for structuring a worldview can be furnished by play. The child's intent drives him or her to maintain the parental bond, explore the world, and play in it. When intent can express itself freely, no dividing line grows between any of these critical needs. While the child plays on the surface, the great work goes on beneath. Regulatory feedback, conceptual construction, and synthesis of all the mechanics of learning are non-conscious procedures. Awareness is the end result. We are always recipients of, not the manufacturers of. When the intentions we press on the child are in flow with his or her intent, she or he learns quickly and joyfully because it will be his or her play with us. Interaction is play, but action and reaction are work. The biological plan is aborted when we invert this genetic plan for learning. That is, to approach learning consciously. We think we or the child must do the work of learning, but that is a biological impossibility. The greatest learning that ever takes place in the human mind, a learning of such vastness, such reach, such complexity, that it overshadows all other learning, takes place in the first 3 years of life without the child ever being aware of learning at all. If play is in the service of survival, does the child then play at mock combat, hunting, or evasion? Not at all. The child plays at imagination, creating images not present to the senses, or she or he plays at fantasy, bending the world to his or her desire, taking some object present to his or her senses, and transforming it his or her mind brain, or she or he plays at imitating, becoming the hero heroine model by imitating the model's precise actions and so assuming the model's dominion over the world. And what does every child believe every adult capable of doing? Of actually being able to bend the world to an inner desire, exactly what the child is busily practicing in his or her passionate play. And what does every child dream? Of possessing his or her own powers over the world when she or he grows up. And how are these powers developed? By the child's following his or her intent. And what is the intent? To play.
So over here, the child, all children think that their parents can do anything. They are all powerful.
Animal play perfects specific survival maneuvers and techniques. These are ways of interpreting and responding to the environment by appropriate physical maneuvers. The child's play is also designed to perfect specific survival maneuvers. But the child's maneuvers are not physical, they are intellectual, the maneuvers of an infinitely open intelligence and an infinitely flexible logic able to mirror back a created image and change some aspect of the hologram within. This is what the huge brain is for, to go beyond the cause effect confines of the hologram itself. As the Duchess says, Alice in Wonderland, take care of the sense and the sounds will take care of themselves. The rule for the child is let him or her function and the structure will take care of itself. Three things are going on in the formative years. His or her brain is constructing an accurate conceptual view of the world as it is. She or he is playing continually that she or he can change that very world. His or her experienced reality is a casual mixture of these two, which is another major reason for the child's long delayed autonomy and another reason why parents must assume responsibility for the child's survival. Survival play cannot give the child survival. Only as this play merges with the work of the creative logic unfolding at age 7 can the child learn to survive as intended. The compelling nature of play poses a problem for adults wishing to get the child to attend to adult notions of reality. The child's intelligence becomes invested in his or her imagined transformation of self and world, and these are singularly compelling. His or her awareness locks into fantasy, reality becomes that play. For the child, the time is always now, the place here, the action me. She has no capacity to entertain adult notions of fantasy world and real world. She or he knows only one world, and that is the very real one is which and with which she or he plays. She or he is not playing at life. Play is life, as Piaget expressed it. For the child, play cannot be opposed to reality because in both cases, belief is arbitrary and pretty much destitute of logical reasons. Play is a reality which the child is disposed to believe in when by himself, just as reality is a game at which he is playing, willing to play with the adult and anyone else who believes in it. Thus, we have to say of the child play that it constitutes an autonomous reality, but with the understanding that the true reality to which it is opposed is considerably less true for the child than for us. The mind-brain system is designed to maintain the matrix in its original form, even when it furnishes the reality experience of play in response to the child's intent. Such a sophisticated division of labor occurs almost from the beginning. Play can be observed in 2-week-old infants and could only take place by careful genetic provision. And yet, the overwhelming response, at least from educators and psychologists, and so seeping down into consensus, is that play is a kind of atavistic, primitive, animal like irresponsibility the child stubbornly insists on, a diabolical magic thinking she or he indulges in to try to avoid coming to grips with the real world and learning about the brass tacks of surviving. Analytical psychologists and behaviorists speak learnedly of fantasy play as wish fulfillment by which the child builds a bulwark between him, herself, and the harsh realities of the world. The child, according to this learned theory, fantasizes to keep from facing this awful truth of human frailty, awareness of his or her importance in this uncaring universe. Or, fantasy play is viewed as a kind of psychological safety valve, allowing the child to ease the pain of actual existence by magical dreams of power over it. Nothing of the sort is involved. The biological plan is vastly more intelligent and skillful, and the purposes of play and imitation are light years beyond these paltry, facile, impotent, and deadly unimaginative academic notions. Play is not evasion of a grim survival necessity, it is the service of survival. The animal survival play centers on mock battle, hunting, evasion because these are the specific activities it will employ at maturity for its physical survival. The human child's corresponding activities are imagination, fantasy play, and imitation. These are the specific acts genetically provided for, imposing an inner imaginary construct not present to the senses on an actual concrete event of the world available to the senses, in order to change the context of that event or the content of some aspect of the earth itself. The great shift of logic at age 7 is to merge work and play. Thus, the conceptual structuring of the earth will be complete and no longer draw a line between the conscious play and the unconscious work when transformations are called for. Should we end here?
No, just one paragraph more.
At no point should there be any break between the fantasy play of childhood and the application of that play through the creative logic unfolding at age 7. As Colin Turnbull points out, the African pygmy child plays at adult reality throughout childhood, and the adults delightedly play with the child in his or her learning. And one day, quite easily and naturally, the child's playing merges with theirs. When a line forms between child play and adult work, the interaction between human and earth collapses. We are then isolated with our own energies, and work we must indeed. The problem set for us is not to try to turn back to aboriginal man. That is impossible. The problem, if we are to survive, is to erase the line between work and play. Only then is personal power amplified by the matrix. With the technological human, the resulting power would be awesome and magnificent indeed, were she or he in a balanced bonding with the earth. And that may be the direction towards which the world is tending.
Okay, so when we were growing up, we used to play so much ghoda ghoda. I'm sitting on an elephant. Do you all see that happening nowadays? Can anyone answer? Grandparents, will you talk? Have you ever become a ghoda for your grandchild?
Oh yes, my husband continuously plays that.
That's
Yeah.
a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
I don't see that happening in too many cases. Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
हम बनते हैं ना
आप बनते हैं क्या? चलिए मौज
नया राम जी के साथ. My God, how much of football we play also.
हाँ. Any questions? Anyone has anything to say?
Yeah, I have a question.
Yeah.
See, I am new to this. I don't know whether this question have answered before or not. So, the question: if any child born without all this, without in this ideal kind of living, so it will definitely, we know that it will definitely affect the later developmental stages of the child,
Yes.
and even in the adult behaviors and life and so on.
Correct.
But how can we it has happened is happened, and how can we work on it, and what is the remedy?
I think he will bring that topic up in the coming chapters.
Yeah, it is coming in the chapters. Okay,
Yeah.
okay, that is
So
great.
let's wait for it.
Okay,
So what
perfect.
he's describing is how the child is creating their reality, how there is a systematic connection developing between the basic matrices, with the first matrix being the womb, the second the mother, the third the earth, and then standing intellectually in their own intellectual capacity. So the four matrices are there, how the interplay and the connections are being made and developed.
Okay,
Anyone else, anything?
thank you.
I have a question.
हाँ रविंद्र जी. क्या हुआ, सुनाई नहीं दे रहा है? कहाँ गए रविंद्र जी?
Hello.
आपका वीडियो ऑन कर लीजिए.
Okay.
हाँ जी.
I have a question regarding the aura. See the aura of the parents.
Yes. Parents and everything else also, not only the parents.
No, till how much age they can carry about this?
You see, that's what they are saying. Generally speaking, from the age of 4 to 7, the children can start seeing the auras. Actually, the child can see the auras from before. But then, because the adults are not being able to conceptualize the aura, they start saying that, ये bakwas hai, ये ready, ये hota nahi hai, and all that stuff. So they start to understand that if I talk about it, the parent is not going to accept that, and then I'm going to get into trouble. So they systematically stop utilizing that particular aspect of their intelligence. Ravindra ji, his feed has got stuck, it seems.
So that they can develop later also.
It becomes difficult once the neural pathway is blocked. It's totally blocked.
So
The
they can develop later also.
The synaptic connections, they disintegrate. Now, once a synaptic connection has disintegrated, to make that connection again, it's not possible. I'm not saying it's not possible, but it's difficult when you grow up.
Yeah, can I have a question here?
Okay. Yes.
Yeah,
Who's that?
but Smita here.
Yes, Smita. What's your full name?
My Dr. Smita Subram.
Okay. Tell me.
Yeah. But the new studies which I have seen in YouTube, they are mentioning that neural pathways can be formed with brain priming and with repeated actions and
Yeah,
repeated
so the
thinking.
brain has plasticity.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
So let's
Plasticity. Yeah.
say I think there's some 40 billion cells or something like that. Now, if the child is not exposed to a lot of stimulus while the child is growing up at the physical level, the
Yeah.
neural pathways or the synaptic connections between the neurons don't take place. Now, any of the neurons which are not being used at that particular age of 7, they get eliminated from the brain. Okay. Once they are eliminated, now you cannot grow back the the brain cells.
Yeah, yeah.
But what happens is that the dendrites of the brains You know, the brain has these dendrite and the axons.
Yeah.
They can grow and make multiple connections.
Yeah.
So the synaptic connections you can have one cell can have 10,000 connections. So if you see, this is a question I ask in most of the workshops we conduct now, that when was the last time you did something new?
Yeah.
So unless you do something new, you are not taking yourself from the known into the unknown. It's the same process which the child experiences, shifting from the known to the unknown. Unless you're doing something which is unknown, you're not going to create new synaptic connections because you're not doing anything new. So the old neural pathways are sufficient to take care of that information. But if we want new growth to take place, that is when you need to read new things. You need to do new things all the time. You need to smell new things. You need to taste new things. You need to try new actions. Okay, that is when the neural growth will take place.
Yeah. But that will not be a replacement to the earlier growth.
Not at all. Not at all. Yes, someone else is asking something.
Yes, Bhaiya, this is Manisha here.
Yeah, Manisha.
I wanted to ask that the child who the author's child who was such a good musician when he was at a young age, he stopped performing so well. So do you think after he grows up, with practice he can get back the ability, or it's lost?
No, see, what happens is that now his attention went somewhere else. Okay, so it's like a road. Now when a road gets overlaid, you don't use the road for a very long time, it will get overgrown. And then at a certain point in time, it will get so overgrown that now you can't use it as a road. It's gone. So if the road is still there and it is activated, then maybe it can come back. But if it is not activated and the attention of the child has gone to some other activity, then it's gone forever. The propensity, it's like the Ugandan children.
So
till the age of 4, they were extremely bright. And then a traumatic event took place. Everything that was developed in the first 4 years was gone, finished. Why? Because the trauma removed everything else, and that became prominent. You know, that fear, psychosis, and getting ingrained with the culture, that became more important.
But still chances, as we discussed earlier, that new neural pathways can be formed.
So if you have continued.
Okay, one at a time. Let Manisha finish, Smita, first. Yeah, Manisha. Manisha, carry on.
So if he would have continued with his, if he would have continued with his music,
absolutely,
he would have kept his magic.
Absolutely, absolutely. I would think so.
Okay.
I would think so. Yes, Smita, you were saying something.
Okay, thank you.
Still, I'm saying the earlier stuff itself. Like if we are finding or trying to make new neural pathways, with start practicing it again and doing it again, there is still he can ignite his talent.
Absolutely, it can be done, but the ease with which it can be done when you are a younger child,
of course,
it will be more difficult. Like for example, language, right? Children are born all over the world. The German will learn German. India may he'll learn Hindi, Bengali, Tamil. That in Zulu land he'll learn Zulu. So wherever the child is, that neuroplasticity is there, right? You pick it up when you're growing up. Later on, to learn a language, yes, some people have a development capacity, but most of us, to learn a language once we've grown up, is not such an easy task. Okay? Okay, anything else? Otherwise, we'll have to shut this session. The backup has to be taken before we can start the next session.
Okay, then. Thank you.
Okay, so we'll meet at 4 o'clock for meditation.
Okay.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Bhaiya.
Thank you, Ram Ram.
Ram Ram. Thank
Ram
you.
Ram. Ram Ram.